Chapter 7 of a Diary of a Nursing Sister on the Western Front, 1914 to 1915. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Marianne Coleman Hipkins. Diary of a Nursing Sister on the Western Front, 1914 to 1915, by Anonymous. Chapter 7. 7. On number ambulance train 5. Winter on the train and in the trenches. January 7, 1915 to February 6, 1915. The winter and the dark last long. Grief grows and dawn delays. Make we our swordarm doubly strong, and lift on high our gaze, and staunch we deep the hearts that weep, and touch our lips with praise. Anon. 7. On number ambulance train 5. Winter on the train and in the trenches. January 7, 1915 to February 6, 1915. The petite vitesse siding, uncomplainingness of Tommy, painting the train, a painful convoy, the Uhlans' watch, officer dressed in bandages, Sotteville, Versailles, the Palais Trianon, a walk at Rouen, the German view and the English view, Punch, When You Return Conqueror, Kay's New Army. Thursday, January 7th. We moved out of Boulogne about 4 a.m. and reached Merville with many long waits. At 2 p.m. loaded up there and filled up at Hazebrouck on way back. Many cases of influenza with high temperatures, also rheumatisms and bad feet. Very few wounded. When they got the khaki hankies they said, "Khaki? That's extra." 9:30 p.m. We have 318 on board this time, including 4 enterics, 4 diphtherias and 18 convalescent scarlets, who caught it from their billet. A quiet-looking man has a very fine new German officer's helmet and sword. "He gave it to me," he said. "I had shot him through the lung. I did the wound up as best I could, and tried to save him, but he died. He was coming for me with his sword. Seems funny to first shoot a man and then try to mop it up. The Germans don't. They finish you off." An officer on the train told me how another officer and 25 men were told off to go and take a new trench which had been dug in the night. Instead of the few they expected, they found it packed with Germans, all asleep. "It's not a pretty story," he said, "but you can't go first and tell them you're coming when you are outnumbered 3 to 1. They had to bayonet every one of those sleeping Germans and killed every one without losing a man. All of my half of the train had khaki hankies and sweets. They simply loved them. They are all, except the infectious cases, just out of the trenches, and such things make them absurdly happy. You would hardly believe it. I am keeping the writing cases and bullseyes for the next lot. There were just enough mufflers to muffle the chilly necks of those who hadn't already got them. The wet has outwetted itself all day. It must be a record flood everywhere. We shall not unload tonight, so had better think about turning in, as I have the third watch at 4 a.m. I found some lovely eau de cologne and shampoo powders from R among the mufflers, and a pet aluminium candlestick from G. Such things give a sister on an AT absurd pleasure. You would hardly believe it. Friday, January 8th. Still pouring. We unloaded at 9 a.m. Got our mail in. My wardmaster was so drunk tonight that the QMS had to send for the OC, and he had just got his corporal stripe. He was a particular ally of mine and was in South Africa. We are in that foulest of all homes for lost trains today, the petite vitesse siding out of B station, with the filth of all the ages around about and below us. You have to shut your windows to keep out the smell of burning garbage and other horrors. It is nearly 3 months since I sat in a chair, except at meals, and that is only a flap-down seat, or saw a fire, except the pails of coke the Tommies have on the lines. I expect we shall be off again tonight somewhere. Saturday, January 9th. Did you see the HAC's story of the frozen Tommy who asked them to warm his hands, and then seeing they were on their way to his trench, hastily explained that he was all right, only a bit numb. One thing one notices about them is that they have an enormous tolerance for each other and never seem to want to quarrel. They take infinite pains in the night not to wake each other in moving over the heaps of legs and arms sprawled everywhere, and will keep in cramped positions for hours rather than risk touching someone else's painful feet or hand. If you want to improve matters, they say, "I shall be all right, sister, it might jog his foot." They never let you miss anyone out in giving things around, and always call your attention to anyone they think needs it, but not to themselves. It is very funny how they won't fuss about themselves, and in consequence you often find things out too late. Last journey a man with asthma and bronchitis was, unfortunately as it turned out, given a top bunk, as he was considered too bad to be a sitting-up case. At 6 a.m. I found him looking very tired and miserable, sitting on the edge. "I can't lie down," he said, "with this cough." When I put him up in a sitting-up corner below, he said, "I could have slept all night like this." It never occurred to him to ask to be changed. They get so used to discomfort that they stay put and never utter. We had missed his distress in the 318 we had on board, and they were sleeping on the floors of the corridors, so the middle bunks were very difficult to get at. Any of them would have changed with him. This happens several times on every journey, but you can't get them to fuss. The Germans and the Sikhs begin to clamour for something directly they are on the train, and keep it up till they go off. Another typical instance, though not a pretty one, of Tommy's reluctance to complain occurred on the last journey. I came on one compartment full, busily engaged in collecting JJs off one man in the middle, with a candle to see by. His blanket, I found, was swarming, and it was ours, not his. One of a lot taken on at Rouen as disinfected. For one ghastly moment I thought it might be the compartment where I'd spent a good half-hour doing up their feet, but it wasn't. I had the blanket hurled out of the window, and they then slept, but they weren't going to complain about it. There was one jovial old boy of 60 with rows of ribbons. He had 3 sons in the army, and when they went, he wasn't going to be left behind, so he re-enlisted. Sunday, January 10th. Woke up at Bailleul. Sun shining for once, and everything, floods and all, looking lovely all the way down. Loaded up early and got down to B by 4 p.m. to hear that we are to go on to Rouen. Another all-night touch. We have put off 14 of the worst cases at B, and are now on our way to R. This is the first time we have shipped Canadians. PPCLI. The only regiment as yet in the fighting line. They are oldish men who have nearly all seen service before, many in South Africa. Lots more wounded this time. Some SLI got badly caught in a wood. They've just come from India. When I took the Devonshire toffee around, a little doubtful whether the HACs would not be too grand for it, one of them started up. "Oh, by George, not really?" We have a boy on board with no wound and no disease, but quite mad. Poor boy. He has to have a special orderly on him. Monday morning, January 11th, Rouen. The approach to Rouen at 6 o'clock on a pitch-dark, wet and starlit morning, with the lights twinkling on the hills and on the river and in the old wet streets, is a beautiful sight. My mad boy has been very quiet all night. Tuesday, January 12th. At Essor Day. By some mistake it hasn't rained all day, so we took the opportunity to get on with painting the train. We worked all the morning and afternoon and got a lot done, and it looks very smart. Huge red crosses on white squares in the middle of each coach, and the number of the warden figures a foot long at each end. This on both sides of the coaches. We have done not quite half the coaches, and are praying that it won't rain before it dries. If it does, the result is pitiable. The orderlies have been shining up the brass rails and paraffining the outside of the train, and have also played and won a football match against No. 1 AT. Wednesday, January 13th. Woke up at Abbeville on the way to Boulogne, where I hope we shall have time to get mails. 5 p.m. We went through Boulogne without stopping and got no mails in consequence, nor could we pick up P, who has been on 96 hours leave. We have been on the move practically without stopping since 11 p.m. last night, and are just getting to Bethune, the place where we went 2 days after Christmas, where we were quite near the guns, and went over the CLH, which had been shelled. Expect to take wounded up here. The country is wetter than ever. It looks one vast swamp. Of course, the rain has spoiled our lovely paint. Thursday, January 14th. We picked up a load in the dark and wet, with some very badly wounded, who kept us busy from 6 p.m. to 4 a.m. without stopping. Some were caked with mud exactly to their necks. One told me he got hit trying to drag out 3 of his section who were half buried by an unexploded coal box. When he got hit, they were left and eventually got finished by our own guns. Another lot of 11 were buried likewise and are there still, but were all killed instantaneously. One man with part of his stomach blown away and his right thigh smashed was trying to get a corporal of his regiment in, but the corporal died when he got there, and he got it as well. He was smiling and thanking all night and saying how comfortable he was. Another we had to put off at Saint-Omer on the off chance of saving his life. He was made happy by 2 tangerine oranges. Many of the sitting-ups have no voice, and they cough all night. We unloaded this morning, got to sleep this afternoon, and are now 5 p.m. on our way up again. The clearing hospitals are overflowing as of old, and like the field ambulances, have more than they can cope with. We have to redress the septic things with H2O2, which keeps them going until they can be specially treated at the base. Some of the enterics are very bad. Train journeys are not ideal treatment for enteric hemorrhage, but it has to be done. 2 of my orderlies are very good with them and take great care of their mouths and know how to feed them. It is a great anxiety when a great hulking GDO, General Duty Orderly, not a nursing orderly, has to take his turn on night duty with the badly wounded. It is time the sun shone somewhere, but it surely will later on. Friday, January 15th. We got to Bailleul too late last night for loading, and went thankfully to bed instead. Now 3:30 p.m, nearly back at B, but expect to be sent on to Rouen. Most sick this time, and bad feet. Not exactly frostbite, but swollen and discoloured from the wet. One of my enterics is a field ambulance boy with a temp of 105, and he only went sick yesterday. How awful he must have felt on duty. He says his body feels 4 sizes too big for him. It is a mild day, sunny in parts and not wet. Still Friday, January 15th. We unloaded at 6 p.m. at B and are to set off again at 4:15 a.m. Business is brisk just now. This last lot only had mostly minor ailments besides the enterics and the woundeds. The French Major has had a letter from his wife at last. They are with the Germans, but quite well. We drank their health tonight in special port and champagne, and had Christmas pudding with sauce d'enfer, as the lighted brandy was called. But we are all going to bed, not Ypres, I'm glad to tell you. This going up by night and down by day is much the less tiring way, as we can undress and have a real night in bed. Later, Hazy Brioc. We have been out, but couldn't get as far as number CLH, where I find tears, as the RTO said we might be going on at 11:30. We came across an anti-aircraft gun pointing to the sky on a little hill. The gunner officer in charge of it seemed very pleased to see us, as he is alone all day. He walks up and down the road a certain distance, dropping stones out of his pocket at each turning, and clears out the surrounding drain pipes to drain his bit of swamp as his amusements. He showed us his 2 kinds of 12-pound shells, high explosives and shrapnel. The high explosive frightens the enemy aeroplane away by its terrific bang, he says. Our own airmen say they don't mind the shrapnel, He says you can't distinguish between one kind of French aeroplane and the Germans until they are close enough over you to see the colours underneath, and then it may be too late to fire. I'm terrified of bringing down a French aeroplane, he said. He was a most cheerful, ruddy, fit-looking boy. 9 p.m. Another train full, and nearing Boulogne. A supply train full of minor cases came down before us from the same place where we've been 3 days running. The 2 clearing hospitals up there are working at awful high pressure, filling in from field ambulances and emptying into the trains. All cases now have to go through the clearing hospitals for classification and diagnosis and dressings, but it is of a sketchy character, as you may imagine. They are all swarming with JJs, even the officers. One of the officers is wounded in the head, shoulder, stomach, both arms and both feet. A boy in my wards with a baby face showed me a beautiful silver enamelled and engraved watch he got off a Yulin. He was treasuring it in his belt to take home to mother. I asked him if the Yulin was dead. "Oh, yes," he said, his face lighting up with glee. "We shot him. He was like a pepper pot when we got to him. Isn't it horrible?" And like the boy in Punch, he'd never killed anybody before he went to France. I wonder what mother will say to his cheerful little story. I've been busy bursting a bad quinsy with inhalers and fomentations. After a few hours he could sing Tipperary and drink a bottle of stout. There are 2 volunteer shop boys from a London Territorial Regiment who call me Madam from force of habit. Sunday, January 17th. We didn't unload at Boulogne last night and are still 11 a.m. taking them on to Ypres, a lovely place on the coast about 10 miles north of Ieper. The hospital there is my old No. General Hospital that I mobilised with, so it will be very jolly to see them all again. We are going through most lovely country on a clear sunny morning, and none of the patients are causing any anxiety, so it is an extremely pleasant journey, and we shall have a good rest on the way back. 3 p.m. Just as I was beginning to forget there were such things as trenches and shrapnel and snipers, they told me a horrible story of 2 Camerons who got stuck in the mud and sucked down to their shoulders. They took an hour and a half getting one out, and just as they said to the other, "All right, Jock, we'll have you out in a minute," he threw back his head and laughed, and in doing so got sucked right under, and is still there. They said there was no sort of possibility of getting him out. It was like quicksand. One told me, not as such a very sensational fact, that he went for 11 weeks without taking off his clothes or a wash, and then he had a hot bath and a change of everything. He remarked that he had to scrape himself with a knife. We have been travelling all day and shan't get to Ypres till about 7 p.m. It is a mercy we got our bad cases off at Boulogne, pneumonias, enterics, 2 SFs, and some badly wounded, including the officer dressed in bandages all over. He was such a nice boy. When he was put into clean pyjamas and had a clean hanky with eau de cologne, he said, "By Jove, it's worth getting hit for this, after the smells of dead horses, dead men and dead everything." He said no one could get into Messines, where there is only one house left standing, because of the unburied dead lying about. He couldn't move his arms, but he loved being fed with pigs of tangerine orange, and like so many, he was chiefly concerned with giving so much trouble. He looked awfully ill, but seldom stopped smiling. Of such are the kingdom of heaven. Later, on the way to Ypres. These are all bound for home and have been in hospital some time. They are clean, shaved, clothed, fed and convalescent. Most of the lying downs are recovering from severe wounds of weeks back. It is quite new even to see them at that stage, instead of the condition we usually get them in. Some are the same ones we brought down from Bethune 3 weeks ago. One man was in a dugout going about 20 feet back from the trench, with 16 others taking cover from our howitzers and also from the enemy's. The cultivated ground is so soft with wet that it easily gives, and the bursting of one of our shells close by drove the roof in and buried these 17. 4 were killed and 11 injured by it, but only 2 were got out alive, and they were abandoned as dead. However, a rescue party of 6 faced the enemy shells above ground and tried to get them out. In doing this, 2 were killed and 2 wounded. The other 2 went on with it. My man and another man were pinned down by beams. The other had his face clear, but mine hadn't. Though he could hear the picks above him, he gave up all hopes of getting out. But the other man, when rescued, said he thought this one was still alive, and then got him out unconscious. When he came to, he was in hospital in a chapel, and it took him a long time to realise he was alive. They generally take you into chapel before they bury you, he said, but I told him they'd done it the wrong way round with me. That was the worst mess I ever got into in this war, he finished up. Wednesday, January 20th, Sotteville. The others have all been out, but I've been a bit lazy and stayed in. Washed my hair and mended my clothes. This place is looking awfully pretty today because all the fields are flooded between us and the long line of high hills about a mile away, and it looks like a huge lake with the trees reflected in it. No orders to move, as usual. Ambulance trains travel as specials in a march, which means a gap in the timetable. There are only about 2 marches in 24 hours, and the RTOs have to fit the ATs into one or other of these marches when orders come that number AT is wanted. We do not get final orders of where our destination is till we get to Hazebrioch or Saint-Omer. We have been 6 days without a mail now, and have taken loads to Ypres and to Ypres. Thursday, January 21st. We were not a whole day in Sotteville for once. Moved out early this morning and are still travelling, 9 p.m, between Abbeville and Boulogne. It has been a especially slow journey, and alas, we didn't go by Amiens, the only time we might have by daylight. Beauvais has a fine cathedral from the outside. I believe we are to go straight on from Boulogne, so we may not get our 6 days' mail, alas. Friday, January 22nd. We didn't get into B till midnight, too late to get mails, and left early this morning. At Calais it was discovered that the kitchen had been left behind in shunting a store wagon, so we have been hung up all day waiting for it at Saint-Omer. Went for a walk. It is a most interesting place to walk about in, swarming with every kind of war material, and the grey towers of the 2 cathedrals looked lovely in a blue sky. Such a dazzling day. We were able to get on with painting the train, which is breaking out into the most marvellous labelling, the orderlies competing with each other. But when at 6 p.m. it seemed the day would never end, number AT steamed up with our kitchen tacked on, and in the kitchen was the mailbag. Joy of joys. We have just got to Bailleul, 10:30 p.m, a few guns banging. We are wondering if we shall clear the CL hospitals tonight, or wait till morning. Depends if they are expecting convoys in tonight and are full. 11 p.m. P and I, fully rigged for night duty, have just been gloomily exploring the perfectly silent and empty station and street, wondering when the motor ambulances will begin to roll up, when B held us from the train with 8 o'clock tomorrow morning, you 2 sillies, and the Major's in bed. So now we can turn in and load up happily by daylight. And it's my turn for the laying down, thank goodness, or rather the liars as they are called. Sunday, January 23rd, another blue, sunny, frosty morning. Loading up this morning was hard to attend to, as a thrilling Taube chase was going on overhead, the sky peppered with bursting shells and aeroplanes buzzing around. Didn't bring it down though. The train is full of very painful feet, like a form of a large burning chilblain all over the foot, and you can't do anything for them, poor lambs. Still Saturday, January 23rd. This is our first journey to Versailles. My only acquaintance with it was on the way up from Le Mans to Villeneuve to join this train. 2 kind sisters living in a sort of little ticket office in the middle of the line washed and fed me at 6 a.m. in between 2 trains, but I saw nothing of the glories of Versailles. Hope to tomorrow. I don't think the men will get much sleep. Their feet are too bad. but we are going to give them a good chance with drugs, the last thing. We shall do the night in 3 watches. Sunday, January 24th, 5 a.m, Versailles. They've had a pretty good night, most of them. If you see any compartment, say 6 sitters and 2 top liars, showing signs of being near the end of their tether with bad feet and long hours of the train, you have only to say cheerfully, "How are you getting on in this dugout?" for every man to brighten visibly, and there is a chorus of, "If our dugouts was like this, I reckon we wouldn't want no relieving," and a burst of wit and merriment follows. You can try it all down the train, it never fails. They are all in first-class coaches, not thirds or seconds. 9:30 a.m. They have only 4 MAs and the hospital is 1½ miles off, so all our 366 limping, muddy scarecrows are not off yet. There is a mist and a piercing north wind and lots of mud. The ATs do so much bringing the British Army from the field that I hope some other trains are busy bringing the British Army to the field, or there can't be many left in the field. They told me another story of a man in the Royal Scots who was sunk in mud up to his shoulders, and the officer offered a canteen of rum and a sovereign to the first who could get him out. For 5 hours 13 men were digging for him, but it filled up always as they dug, and when they got him out he died. 6 p.m, just getting to Rouen, properly to load for Ypres. They do keep us moving. We just had time to go and see the Palais Trianon with the French sergeant, who is nearly a gentleman and an artist. Is there anything else quite like it anywhere else? It was défense d'entrée, so we only wandered around the grounds and looked in at the windows, down the avenues and round the ponds and hundreds of statues, and went up the great escalier. Louis XIV certainly did himself proud. It was a long way to go, and we were walking for hours till we got dog-tired after the long load from Bailleul, and after lunch retired firmly onto our beds. I don't think we shall take patients on tonight. Monday, January 25th. We've been at Sotteville all day, had time to read last week's Times, an exceptionally interesting lot. Have just had orders to load up at Rouen for Ypres tomorrow. Then I hope we shall go back to Boulogne. We have not stayed more than an hour or 2 in Boulogne since January 9th. That is for 17 days. But we've managed to just pick up our mails every few days while unloading the bad cases. We ought to get back there for a mail on Thursday. We have taken down a good many Northamptons lately. They seem an exceptionally seasoned and intelligent lot, and have been through the thick of everything since Mons. Did I tell you that in one place, I don't suppose it is the same all along the line, they are doing 48 hours in the trenches, followed by 48 hours back in billets, barns, etc., for 6 times, and then 12 days rest. When they get themselves and their rifles cleaned, they have armourers' shops for this. They nearly all say that only the men who are quite certain they will never get back say they want to. If any others say it, well, they're liars. But for all that, you do find one here and there who means it. One Canadian asked how long he'd be sick with his feet. "I want to get back to the regiment," he said. They seemed rather out of it with the Tommies, some of them. Just had a grand hot bath from a passing engine in exchange for chocolate. We shall have a quiet night tonight. Sotteville is the quietest place we ever sleep in. There is no squealing of whistles and shouting of French railmen as in all the big stations. Last night they were shunting and jigging us about all night between Rouen and Sotteville. Slow bumping over hundreds of points is much worse to sleep in than fast travelling. In either case you wake whenever you pull up or start off. But we shall miss the train when we get into a dull hotel bedroom or billet, or perhaps a tent. My month at Le Mans in Madame's beautiful French bed was the one luxury I've struck so far. Tuesday, 26th of January. A dazzling blue spring day. As we were not going in to load at Rouen till 3 p.m, we went for the most glorious walk in this country. We crossed the ferry over the Seine to the foot of the steep high line of hills which eventually overlooks Rouen, and climbed up to the top by a lovely winding woody path in the sun. The boatman congratulated us on the sinking of the Blücher. As a naval man, I suppose. "Who said war?" said P, while we were waiting on the shingle for the boat. It did seem very remote. At the top we got to the church of Le Bon Secours, which is in a very fine position with a marvellous view. We had some lovely cider in a very clean pub with a garden, and then took the tram down a very steep track into Rouen. I was standing in the front of the tram for the view over Rouen, which was dazzling, with the spires and the river and the bridges, when we turned a sharp corner and smashed bang into a market cart coming up our track. For a moment one thought the man and woman and the horse must be done for. The horse disappeared under the train, and there arose such a screaming that the 3 Tommies and I fell over each other trying to get out to the rescue. When we did, we found the man and woman had been luckily shot clear out of the tram, except that the man's hand was torn, and the old woman was frantically screaming, "Mon cheval! Mon cheval! Mon cheval!" at least 100 times without stopping. The others were out by this time, and the 2 tram people and the French clack went on at its top speed, while P and the Tommies and a very clever old woman out of the tram tried to cut the horse clear of the broken cart, and I did up the man's hand with our hankies. The only one concerned least was the horse, who kept quiet with its legs mixed up in the tram. At last the tram succeeded in moving clear of the horse without hurting it, and it was got up smiling after all. The outside old woman went on picking up the fish and the harness, etc. The man was taken off to have his hand bathed, and the poor old woman of the cart stopped screaming "Mon cheval," and went off to have a drink, and we walked on and found a train at Rouen. That sort of thing is always happening in France. I hope the overworked people at the heads of the various departments of the British Army realise how much the men appreciate what they try and do for them in the trenches. If you ask what the billets are like, they say, "Barnes and such like, they do the best they can for us." If you ask if the trench conditions are as bad for the Germans, they say, "They're worse off, they ain't looked after like what we are." 9:30 p.m. on the way to Ypres. I was just going to say that from the Seine to Le Havre there's nothing to report, when I came across a young educated German in my wards, with his left leg off from the hip and his right from below the knee, and a bad shell wound in his arm, all healed now, done at Ypres on 24th of October, and I had an hour's most thrilling and heated conversation with him in German. He was very down on the English sisters in hospital because he says they hated him and didn't treat him like the rest. I said that was because they couldn't forget what his regiment, Bavarians, had done to the Belgian women and children and old men and the French, and he said he couldn't forget how the Belgian woman had put out the eyes of the German wounded at Liège and thrown boiling water on them. I said they were driven to it. I have since found that no sort of evidence was brought forward by the Germans to support this charge, and it is emphatically denied by the Belgian authorities. I asked him a lot of straight questions about Germany and the war, and he answered equally straight. He said they had food in Germany for 10 years, and that they had 10 million men, and that all the present students would be in the army later on, and that practically the supply could never stop. And I said that however long they could go on, in the end there would be no more Germany, because she was up against 5 nations. He said no man has any fear of a Russian soldier, and that though they were slower over it, they would get Paris, but not London except by Zeppelins. He admitted that it would be sehr schwer to land troops in England, and that our navy was the best, but we had so few soldiers they hardly counted. He got very excited over the Zeppelins. I asked why the Germans hated the English, and he said, "In Berlin we do not speak of the English at all. It is the French and the Russians we hate." He said the Turks were no good, zu helfen, and Austria not much better. He was very down on Belgium for resisting in the first place, and said the Schuld was with France and Russia. They were very much astonished when England didn't remain neutral. He had the cheek to say that 3 German soldiers were as good as 20 English. So I assured him that 5 English could do for 50 Germans, and went on explaining carefully to him how there could be no more Germany in the end, because the right must win. And he said, "So you say in England, but we know otherwise in Deutschland, and I am a German. So as I am in English, we had to agree to differ." His faith in his Vaterland nearly made him cry, and must have given him a temperature. I felt quite used up afterwards. He is fast asleep now. There is also an old soldier of 63 who says General French and General Smith-Dorrien photographed him as the oldest soldier in the British Army. He has 4 sons in it, 1 killed, 2 wounded. He was with General Lowe in the Citral expedition, and is called Donald MacDonald of the KOSBSs. Unfortunately, I was reduced to the ranks for being drunk the other day, he said gaily, but the captain, he said, "Don't lose heart, MacDonald, you'll get it all back." Wednesday, January 27th. They have found a way of warming our quarters when we have not an engine on. I don't know what we should have done without it today. It is icy cold. Mails tomorrow, hooray! Going to turn in early. Thursday, January 28th. Got to Boulogne this morning. Have been getting stores in and repairs done. Expect to be sent up any time. Sharp frost and cold wind. Friday, January 29th. One of those difficult-to-bear days. Hung up all day at a place beyond Saint-Omer, listening to guns and doing nothing when there's so much to be done. The line is probably too busy to let us up. It happens to be a dazzling blue day, which must be wiping off 50% of the horrors of the front. The other 50% is what they are out for and see the meaning of. We are to go in an hour's time, destination unknown. Saturday, January 30th. We got up to Merville at 1 o'clock last night and loaded up only 45, and are now just going to load up again at a place on the way back. We have been completely done out of the La Bassière business. Haven't been near it. Number CLH that we saw on December the 27th, where SC and 2 more of my number GH friends were, had to be evacuated in a hurry, as several orderlies were killed in the shelling. One of my badly wounded says the Major, whose servant he has been for 4 years, asked him to make up the fire in his dugout while he went to the other end of the trench. While he was doing the fire, a shell burst over the dugout, and a bit went through his left leg and touched his right. If the Major had been sitting in his chair, where he was a minute before, his head would have been blown off. He said, "When the Major came back and found me, he drove everybody else away, and stayed with me all day and made me cocoa, and at night carried my stretcher himself and took me right to headquarters." His eyes shine when he talks of the Major, and he seems so proud he got it instead. I asked a boy in the sitting-ups what was the matter with him. Too small, he said. Another said too young. He was aged 15 in the Black Watch. A young monkey badly wounded in hand and throat. Lighting a cigarette, the shatter to his hand saved worse destruction to his throat, though bad enough as it is. Afterwards settled him in, fixed his eye on me and said, "Are you going to be in here alone of us all the way?" "Yes," I said. "That's a good job, and he is taking good care to get his money's worth, I can tell you." Some of them are roaring at the man in Punch, who made a gallant attempt to do justice to all his Christmas presents at once. There is a Sergeant Major of the Royal Scots, very indignant at having been made to go sick with bad feet. Any attempt to fuss over him is met with, "I need no attention whatsoever, thank you, sister. I feel more like apologising for being in here. Only 5 weeks of active service," he growled. The latest Franco-British idea is to harass the Boches until they are gone. Saturday, January 31st. We did go on to Rouen. B is full to the brim. We have only unloaded at B 3 times since Christmas. I'm beginning to think we waste a lot of sympathy on the poor wounded, rocking in a train all night after being on it all day. One of mine with a bullet still in his chest and some pneumonia, who seemed very ill when he was put on at Merville, said this morning he felt a lot better and had had the best night for 5 days, and my fidgety boy with the wound in his throat made a terrible fuss at being put off at Boulogne when he found he was the only one in his compartment to go, and that I wasn't going with him. I had the easy watch last night because of my cold, and went to bed at 1 a.m. Got a hot bath this morning and lay low all day, till a stroll between the Seine and the floods after tea, Sotteville. There are 4 trains waiting here, and the CS's have been skating on the floods. We move on at 1 o'clock tonight. Number AT had a bomb dropped each side of their train at Bailleul, but they didn't explode. The French instruction books have come, and I am going to start the French class for the men on the train. They are very keen to learn, chiefly, I think, to make a little more running with the French girls at the various stopping places. 2 officers last night were awfully sick and not been taken off at B, but I think they'll get home from Rouen. One said he must get home, if only for 10 minutes, to feel he was out of France. Wednesday, February 3rd. Moved on last night and woke up at Bailleul. Some badly wounded on the train, but not on my half. On the other beat, beyond Rouen, the honeysuckle is in leaf, the catkins are out, and the woods are full of buds. What a difference it will make when spring comes. On this side it is all canals, bogs and pollards, and the eternal mud. We found pinned on a sock from a London school child. Whosoever receives this, when you return conqueror, drop me a line, and then her name and address. Thursday, February 4th. For once we unloaded at B and went to bed instead of taking them on all night to Rouen. Moved out of B at 5 a.m, breakfast at Saint-O, where we nearly got left behind, strolling on the line during a wait. We are going to move AL in the mining district, where L is. 3 p.m. We've just taken on about 70 Indians, mostly sick, some badly wounded. They are much cleaner than they used to be in clothes, but not, alas, in habits. Aeroplanes are chasing a Taube overhead, but it has not been shelled. Guns are making a good noise all around. We are waiting for a convoy of British now. It is a lovely afternoon. The guns were shaking the train just now. One big bang made us all pop our heads out of the windows to look for the bomb. But it wasn't a bomb. A rosy-faced, white-haired colonel just came up to me and said, "You've brought us more firing this afternoon than we've heard in a long time." We're filling up with British wounded now on the other half of the train. It is getting late and we shan't unload tonight. Later, we were hours loading up because all the motor drivers are down with flu, and there were only 2 available. The rest are all busy bringing wounded into the clearing hospital. The spell of having the train full of slight medical cases and bad feet seems to be over, and wounded are coming on again. 3 of my sitting-up Indians have temperatures of 104, so you can imagine what the lying-downs are like. They are very anxious cases to look after, partly because they are another race, and partly because they can't explain their wants, and they seem to want to be let die quietly in a corner rather than fall in with your notions of their comfort. At Bailleul, on our last journey, we took on a heavenly white puppy, just old enough to lap, quite wee and white and fat. He cries when he wants to be nursed and barks in a lovely falsetto when he wants to play, and waddles after our feet when we take him for a walk, but he likes being carried best. Some Tommies on a truck at Railhead brought him up for us. They adore his little mother and 2 brothers. Friday, February 5th, Boulogne. We did get in late last night and got to bed at 1 a.m. They are unloading during the night again now, and also loading up at night. One boy last night lost his right hand. His left arm and leg were wounded, and both his eyes. "Yes, I've got more than my share," he said, "but I'll get over it all right." I didn't happen to answer for a minute, and in a changed voice he said, "Shan't I? Shan't I?" Of course I assured him that he'd get quite well, and that he was ticketed to go straight to an eye specialist. "Thank God for that," he said, as if the eye specialist had already cured him, but it is doubtful if any eye specialist will save his eyes. Today has been a record day of brilliant sun, blue sky and warm air, and it has transformed the muddy, sloppy, dingy Boulogne of the last 2 months into something more like Cornwall. We couldn't stop on the train, there were no orders likely, in spite of being tired, but went into town in the morning, and on the Lawnstone Pier in the afternoon, and then to tea at the buffet at the Maritime, where you have tea with real milk and fresh butter, and jam, not out of a tin, and a tablecloth and a china cup, luxuries beyond description. On the pier there were gulls and a sunny sort of salt wind, and big waves breaking, and a glorious view of the steep little town piled up in layers above the harbour, which is packed with shipping. End of Chapter 7. Recording by Marianne Coleman Hipkins. www.thisvoiceforyou.com.
Eight of Diary of a Nursing Sister on the Western Front, 1914 to 1915. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Diary of a Nursing Sister on the Western Front, 1914 to 1915, by Anonymous. Chapter 8. On number ambulance train 6. Rouen, Neuve-Chapelle, Saint-Eloi, February 7th, 1915 to March 31st, 1915. Under the lee of the little wood I'm sitting in the sun. What will be done in Flanders before the day be done? Above, beyond the larches, the sky is very blue. It's the smoke of hell in Flanders that leaves the sun for you. By H.C.F. The Indians, Saint-Omer, the Victoria League, Poperinghe, a bad load. Left behind, Rouen again, an off spell, en route to Étretat, Sotteville, Neuve-Chapelle, Saint-Eloi, the Indians, spring in northwest France, the convalescent home, Kitchener's boys. Sunday, February 7th. This is a little out-of-the-way town called Blendecq, rather in a hollow. Number ambulance train has been here before, and the natives look at us as if we were Boches. There are 250 Royal Engineers inhabiting a long truck train here. We have given them all our mufflers and mittens, they had none, and the officer has had our officers to tea with him. Our men have played a football match with them, drawn. We went for a splendid walk this morning uphill to a pine wood bordered by a moor with whins. I've now got in my bunky hole, it is not quite 6 feet square, a polypod fern, a plate of moss, a pot of white hyacinths, and also catkins, violets, and mimosa. I suppose we shall move on to-night, if there is a march. Many hundreds of French cavalry passed across the bridge over this cutting this morning. They looked so jolly. One of the staff who has been to Woolwich on leave says that Kitchener's new army there is extraordinarily promising and keen. So far we have only heard good of those out here, from the old hands who've come across them. 9:45 p.m. We are just getting to the place where all the fighting is, La Bassée way. Probably we shall load up with wounded to-night. There's a great flare some way off that looks like the burning villages we used to see round Ypres. It is a very dark night. Monday morning, February 8th. We stood by last night and are just going to load now. All is quiet here. Said to have been nothing happening the last few days. 7 p.m. Nearing Boulogne. We've had a very muddly day, taking on at 4 different places. I have a coach full of Indians. They have been teaching me some more Hindustani. Some of them suddenly began to say their prayers at sunset. They spread a small mat in front of them, knelt down, and became very busy "knockin' 'oles in the floor with their 'eads," as the orderly describes it. We have a lot of woundeds from Saturday's fighting. They took 3 German trenches and got in with the bayonet until they were treading on dead Germans. The wounded sitting-ups are frightfully proud of it. After their personal reminiscences you feel as if you'd been jabbing Germans yourself. They say they lose their minds in the charge, and couldn't do it if they stopped to think, because "they're feelin' men same as us," one said. A corporal on his way back to the front from taking some people down to St O under a guard saw one of his pals at the window in our train. He leaped up and said, "I wish to God I could get chilblains and come down with you." This to an indignant man with a shrapnel wound. I've got 5 bad cases of measles with high temperatures and throats. Tuesday, February 9th. Again they unloaded us at Boulogne last night, and we are now 11 A.M. on our way up again. The Indians I had were a very interesting lot. The race differences seem more striking the better you get to know them. The Gurkhas seem to be more like Tommies in temperament and expression, and all the Mussulmans and the best of the Sikhs and the Jats might be princes and prime ministers in dignity, feature, and manners. When a Sikh refuses a cigarette, if you are silly enough to offer him one, he does it with a gesture that makes you feel like a housemaid who ought to have known better. The beautiful Mussulmans smile and salaam and say Merbani, however ill they are, if you happen to hit upon something they like. They all make a terrible fuss over their kit and their puggarees and their belongings, and refuse to budge without them. Sister M. found her orders to leave when we got in, but she doesn't know where she is going, so after this trip we shall be 3 again, which is a blessing, as there are not enough wards for 4, and no one likes giving any up. It also gives us a spare bunk to store our warehouses of parcels for men, which entirely overflow our own dugouts. As soon as you've given out one lot, another bale arrives. We have had every kind of infectious disease to nurse in this war except smallpox. The infectious ward is one of mine, and we've had enteric, scarlet fever, measles, mumps, and diphtheria. 7 P.M. We got to the new place where we wait for a marche, just at tea time, and we had a grand walk up to the moor, where you can see half over France each way. There's a travelling wireless station up there. Each pole has its receiver in a big grey motor lorry by the roadside, where they live and sleep. The road wound down to a little curly village with a beautiful old grey church. On the top of the moor on the way back it was dark, and the flash signals were morsing away to each other from the distant hills. It reminded me of the big forts on the kopjes round Pretoria. I had my first French class this afternoon at St Omer in the men's mess truck. There were 17, including the quartermaster sergeant and the cook's boy. I'd got a small blackboard in Boulogne, and they all had notebooks, and the QMS had arranged it very nicely. They were very keen, and got on at a great pace. They weren't a bit shy over trying to pronounce, and will, I think, make good progress. They have a great pull over men of their class in England by their opportunities of listening to French spoken by the French, such a totally different language to French spoken by most English people. My instruction book is Hugo's, which is a lightning method compared to the usual school books. They are doing exercises for me for next time. Wednesday, February 10th, 9 P.M. We woke at Merville after a particularly rocky, noisy night journey, and loaded up there with woundeds and sick, also Indians, but not in my wards for once. My blessés kept me busy till the moment we unloaded this evening at Boulogne, and I had not time to hear much about their doings. One extraordinarily sporting boy had a wound right through his neck, involving his swallowing. It took about half an hour to give him a feed through a tube, but he stuck it, smiling all the time. Another older man was shot in the stomach and looked as if he wouldn't get over it. He told me he'd already been in hospital 8 weeks, shot in the head at the Aisne. I said what hard luck to have to go through it again. It's got to be done, he said. I didn't give it a thought. I think I shall get over this, he said, but I don't want to go back a 3rd time. He has a wife and 3 children in Ireland. We are to move up again at 4 A.M. Just had dinner soup, boiled beef tough as cable, and ration cheese, and coffee, and the Daily Mail. Thursday, February 11th. We have spent most of the day at St Omer, and got a lovely walk in this morning along the canal, watching the big barges which take 2,000 tons of beetroots for sugar. There is a scheme on foot for fitting up these big barges as transport for the sick (this one came from Furnes) as moving clearing hospitals. I have been over one, in Rouen. They are not yet in use, but might be rather jolly in the summer. It is the warmest spring day we've had. I had my second French class this afternoon, again at St Omer. We are now moving on up to Bailleul. I expect we shall take patients on this evening, and have them all night. Friday, February 12th, 6 A.M. We did a record, loading up in 50 minutes last night, chiefly medical cases, and took 8 hours to crawl to Boulogne. Now we are on the way for Havre, but shall not get there till about 10 P.M. to night, so they will have a long day in the train. A good many of the lying downs are influenza, with high temperatures and no voice. It is a bore getting to Boulogne in the night, as we miss our mails and the Daily Mail. 7 P.M. This is an interminable journey. Have not yet reached Rouen, and shan't get to Havre till perhaps 2 A.M. The patients are getting very weary, especially the sitting-ups. The wards of acute liers you can run like a hospital. Some of the orderlies are now getting quite keen on having their wards clean and swept, and the meals and feeds up to time, and the washings done. But it has taken weeks to bring them up to it. When they do all that well, I can get on with the diets, temperatures, treatments, and dressings, etc. On the long journeys we take round at intervals, smokes, chocolate, papers, hankies, etc., when we have them. The Victoria League has done me well in bales of hankies. They simply love the affectionate and admiring messages pinned on from New Zealand, and one of them always volunteers to answer them. We shall be up in shifts again to night. We are all hoping to have a day in Rouen on the way back, for baths, hair washing, shopping, seeing the paymaster, and showing the new Sister the sights. For sheer beauty and interestingness it is the most endearing town. You don't know which you love best, its setting with the hills, river, and bridge, or its beautiful spires and towers, and marvellous old streets and houses. Saturday, February 13th, 2 A.M. Still on the way to Havre, and we loaded up on Thursday. This journey is another revelation of what the British soldier will stick without grumbling. The sitting-ups are 8 in a carriage, some with painful feet, some with wounded arms, and some with coughs, rheumatism, etc., but you don't hear a word of grousing. It is only when things are prosperous and comfortable that Tommy grumbles and has grievances. Some of the liers are too ill to know how long they've been on the train. One charming Scotchman, who enlisted for Kitchener's army but was put into the Regulars because he could shoot, has just asked me to write my name and address in his little book so that he can write from England. He also says that we must look after ourselves and study our health, because there's a bad time coming and our country will need us. He's done his share after an operation, and will never be able to do any more. Everything points to this service having to put out all it can both here and at home. Many new hospitals are being organized, and there are already hundreds. We have a poor lunatic on board who keeps asking us to let his wife come in. The train is crawling with J.J.'s. Saturday, 4:30 A.M. Just seen the last stretcher off, now going to undress, first time since Wednesday night, and turn in. Saturday, 13th February, Havre. It is 4 months to day since I joined the train. It seems much longer in some ways, and yet the days go by very quickly, even the off days, and when the train is full the hours fly. We went into the familiar streets this morning that we saw so much of in August waiting for orders, and had a look at the sea. The train moved off at tea time, so we had the prettiest part of the journey in a beautiful evening sunlight, lighting up the woods and hills. The palm is out, and the others saw primroses. We have also seen some snowdrops. After a heavy journey with 2 nights out of bed, you don't intend to do any letter writing or mending or French classes, but look out of the window, or sleep, or read Dolly dialogues. You always get compensation for these journeys in the longer journey back, with probably a wait at Rouen or Sotteville, and possibly another at Boulogne. We have been going up and down again very briskly this last fortnight, between Boulogne and the back of the front. Sunday, 14th. A dismal day at Sotteville, pouring cats and dogs all day, and the train cold. Shrove Tuesday. We were all day coming up yesterday. Got to Boulogne in the middle of the night, and went on again to St Omer, where we woke this morning. So we missed our mails again. It will be a full week's mails when we do get them. Lovely blue sky to day. Had a walk with Sister B. round the town, and now this afternoon we are on the way to Poperinghe, in a beaten country where we haven't been for 3 months. French class due at 3 P.M. if we haven't got there by then. We have just passed a graveyard absolutely packed with little wooden crosses. Ash Wednesday, February 17th, 6 A.M. We took on a very bad load of wounded at Poperinghe, more like what used to happen 3 months ago in the same place. They were only wounded the night before, and some the same day. The clearing hospitals had to be cleared immediately. We have just got to Boulogne, and are going to unload here at 8:30 A.M. Must stop. Hope to get a week's mails to day. A brisk air battle between 1 British and 1 French and 2 Taubes was going on when we got there, and a perfect sky for it. Very high up. A wounded major on the train was talking about the men. It's not a case of our leading the men. We have a job to keep up with them. It was a pretty sad business getting them off the train this morning. There were so many compound fractures, and no amount of contriving seemed to come between them and the jolting of the train all night. And, to add to the difficulties, it was pouring in torrents and icy cold, and the railway people refused to move the train under cover, so they went out of the warm train on to damp stretchers in an icy rain. They were nearly all in thin pyjamas, as we'd had to cut off their soaking khaki. They were practically straight from the trenches. But once clear of trains, stretchers, and motor ambulances, they will be warmed, washed, fed, bedded, and their fractures set under an anaesthetic. One man had his arm blown to pieces on Monday afternoon, had it amputated on Monday night, and was put into one of our wards on Tuesday and admitted to Base Hospital on Wednesday. But that is ticklish work. One boy, a stretcher bearer, with both legs severely wounded, very nearly bled to death. He was pulled round somehow. About midnight, when he was packed up in wool and hot water bottles, etc., when I asked him how he was feeling, he said gaily, "Quite well, delightfully warm, thank you." We got him taken to hospital directly the train got in at 4 A.M. The others were unloaded at 9 A.M. We are now, 5 P.M., on our way to Étaples, probably to clear the General Hospital there, either to night or to morrow morning. It hasn't stopped pouring all day. It took me till lunch to read my enormous mail. Major T. has heard to day that the French railway people want his train back again for passenger traffic, so the possibility of our all being suddenly disbanded and dispersed is hanging over us. But I believe it has been threatened before. Thursday, February 18th. In bed, 10 P.M. We have had a very heavy day with the woundeds again from Bailleul. We unloaded again at Boulogne this evening, and are to go up again some time to night. There is a great deal going on in our front. There was a boy from Suffolk, of Kitchener's army, in my ward, who has only been out 3 weeks. He talked the most heavenly East Anglian. "I was agin the barn, and that fared to hit me," all in the right sing song. A sergeant of the Duke of Cornwall's Light Infantry had a fearful shell wound in his thigh, which has gone wrong, and as the trouble is too high for amputation, they will have their work cut out to save his life. They were getting out of the trench for a bayonet charge, and he had just collected his men when he was hit. So the officer shook hands with him and went on with the charge, leaving him and another man, wounded in the leg, in the trench. They stayed there several hours with no dressings on, sinking into the mud (can you wonder it has gone wrong?), until another man turned up and helped them out. Then they walked to the regimental aid post 200 yards away, helped by the sound man. There they were dressed and had the anti-tetanus serum injection, and were taken by stretcher bearers to the next dressing station, and thence by horse ambulance to the field ambulance, and then by motor ambulance to where we picked them up. There are lots of French's regiment wounded. Friday, February 19th. We left Boulogne at 5 A.M. to day, and were delayed all the morning farther up by one of the usual French collisions. A guard had left his end of a train and was on the engine, so he never noticed that 12 empty trucks had come uncoupled and careered down a hill, where they were run into and crumpled up by a passenger train. The guard of that one was badly injured (fractured spine), but the passengers only shaken. At St Omer, Miss M. and Major T. and I were being shown over the khaki train when ours moved off. There was a wild stampede, the khaki train had all its doors locked, and we had miles to go inside to get out. Their orderlies shouted to ours to pull the communication cord, the only way of appealing to the distant engine, so it slowed down, and we clambered breathlessly on. We are sidetracked now at the jolly place of the moor and the wireless lorries, probably move on in the night. Saturday, February 20th, 9 P.M. We've had a very unsatisfactory day, loading up at 4 different places, and still on our way down. I'm just going to lie down to be called at 2 A.M. Now we're 4. 2 go to bed for the whole night, and the other 2 take the train for half the night when we have a light load, as to day. If they are all bad cases, we have 2 on and 2 off for the 2 watches. We have some Indians on to day, but most British, and not many blessés. The other day a huge train of reinforcements got divided by mistake. The engine went off with all the officers, and the men had a joy ride to themselves, invaded the cafés where they sometimes get half poisoned, and in half an hour's time there was a big scrap among themselves, with 50 casualties. So the story runs. A humane and fatherly orderly has just brought me a stone hot water bottle for my feet as I write this in the rather freezing dispensary coach in the middle of the train, in between my rounds. All the worst cases and the Indians were put off at Boulogne, and the measles, mumps, and diphtherias, so there isn't much to do. Some are snoring like an aeroplane. Monday, February 22nd. We got a short walk yesterday evening after unloading at Rouen. There was a glorious sunset over the bridge, and the lights just lighting up, and Rouen looked its beautifulest. We slept at Sotteville, and this morning Sister and I walked down the line into Rouen, and saw the Paymaster and the Cathedral, and did some shopping, and had a boiled egg and real butter and tea for lunch, and came back in the tram. Sister S. is in bed with influenza. The lengthening days and better weather are making a real difference to the gloom of things, and though there is a universal undercurrent of feeling that enormous sacrifices will have to be made, it seems to be shaping for a step farther on, and an ultimate return to sanity and peace. It is such a vast upheaval when you are in the middle of it, that you sometimes actually wonder if every one has gone mad, or who has gone mad, that all should be grimly working, toiling, slaving, from the firing line to the base, for more destruction, and for more highly finished and uninterrupted destruction, in order to get peace. And the men who pay the cost in intimate personal and individual suffering and in death are not the men who made the war. Wednesday, February 24th. We have been all day in Boulogne, and move up at 8:15 this evening, which means loading up after breakfast and perhaps unloading to morrow evening. It has given Sister S. another day to recover from her attack of influenza. Have been busy one way and another all day, but went for a walk after tea and saw over No. General Hospital at the Casino, a splendid place, working like clockwork. Lots of bad cases, but they all look clean and beautifully cared for and rigged up. Thursday, February 25th. Moved up to the place with the moor during the night. Glorious clear sunny morning. Couldn't leave the train for a real walk, as there were no orders. This time last year the last thing one intended to do was go and travel about France for 6 months, with occasional excursions into Belgium. The Times sometimes comes the next day now. 9 P.M. The ways of French railways are impenetrable. In spite of orders for Bailleul before lunch, we are still here, and less than ever able to leave the train for a walk. This is the 4th day with no patients on, the longest "off" spell since before Christmas. It shows there's not much doing or much medical leakage. Friday, February 26th. We loaded up this morning with a not very bad lot, mine all sitters except some enterics, a measles, and a diphtheria, and are on our way down again. I am already packed to get off at Boulogne if my leave is in Major M.'s office. Saturday, February 27th, 9 P.M. Hotel at Boulogne. All the efforts to get my 7 days' leave have failed, as I thought they would. Wednesday, March 3rd, Boulogne. There is not a great deal to do or see here, especially on a wet day. Friday, March 5th, 5 P.M. On way down from Chocques. Mixed lot of woundeds, medicals, Indians, and Canadians. I have a lad of 24 with both eyes destroyed by a bullet, and there is a bad trachy. Nothing very much has been going on, but the German shells sometimes plop into the middle of a trench, and each one means a good many casualties. 10 P.M. We've had a busy day and are not home yet. My boy with the dressings on his head has not the slightest idea that he's got no eyes, and who is going to tell him? The pain is bad, and he has to have a lot of morphia, with a cigarette in between. We shall probably not unload to night, and I am to be called at 2 A.M. The infectious ward is full of British enterics, diphtherias and measles, and Indian mumpies. Saturday, March 6th, Boulogne. Instead of being called at 2 for duty, was called at 1 to go to bed, as they unloaded us at that hour. Last night we pulled up at Hazebrouck alongside a troop train with men, guns, and horses, just out from the Midlands. 2 lads in a truck with their horses asked me for cigarettes. Luckily, thanks to the Train Comforts Fund's last whack, I had some. One said solemnly that he had a cousin to avenge, and now his chance had come. They both had shining eyes, and not a rollicking but an eager excitement as they asked when the train would get there, and looked as if they could already see the shells and weren't afraid. Sunday, March 7th. We are stuck in the jolly place close to G.H.Q., but can't leave the train as there are no orders. I've been having a French class with the wall of the truck for a blackboard, and occasional bangs from a big gun somewhere. Tail end of Monday, March 8th. On way down to Étretat, where No. G.H. is, which we shall reach to morrow about tea time. A load of woundeds this time, Very busy all day till now, midnight, and haven't had time to hear many of their adventures. They seem to all come from a line of front where the Boches are persistently hammering to break through, and though they don't get any for'arder they cause a steady leakage. We heard guns all the while we were loading. A dressing station 5 miles away had just been shelled, and a Major, Royal Army Medical Corps, killed, and 2 other R.A.M.C. officers wounded. I have a man wounded in 8 places, including a fractured elbow and a fractured skull which has been trephined. What is left of him that hasn't stopped bullets is immensely proud of his bandages. He was one of 19 who were in a barn when a shell came through the roof and burst inside, spitting shrapnel bullets all over them. All wounded and 1 killed. We have just put off an emergency case of gas gangrene, Temp 105, who came on as a sitter. They so often say after a bad dressing, "I'm a lot of trouble to ye, Sister." Later. Just time for a line before I do another round and then call my relief. It is an awfully cold night. Tuesday, March 9th, 12 noon. We are passing through glorious country of wooded hills and valleys with a blue sky and shining sun, and all the patients are enjoying it. It is still very cold and there is a little snow about. They call their goatskin coats teddy bears. One very ill boy, wounded in the lungs, who was put off at Abbeville, was wailing, "Where's my Mary box?" as his stretcher went out of the window. We found it, and he was happy. Wednesday, March 10th. We got to Étretat at about 3 P.M. yesterday after a 2 days' and 1 night load, and had time to go up to the hospital, where I saw S. The matron was away. We only saw it at night last time, so it was jolly getting the afternoon there. The sea was a thundery blue, and the cliffs lit up yellow by the sun, and with the grey shingle it made a glorious picture to take back to the train. It had been a heavy journey with bad patients, and we were rather tired, so we didn't explore much. We woke at Sotteville near Rouen this morning, and later in the day had a most fatiguing and much too exciting adventure over catching the train. 2 of the Sisters and I walked into Rouen about 10:30 and found No. ambulance train marked up as still at Sotteville in the R.T.O.'s office, and so concluded it would be there all day. So we did our businesses of hair washing, cathedral, lunch, etc., and then took the tram back to Sotteville. The train had gone. The Sotteville R.T.O., about a mile off, told us it was due to leave Rouen loaded up for Havre at 2:36. It was then 2:15, and it was usually about 3/4 of an hour's walk up the line (we'd done it once this morning), so we made a desperate dash for it. Sister M. walks very slowly at her best, so we decided that I should sprint on and stop the train, and she and the other follow up. The Major met me near our engine, and was very kind and concerned, and went on to meet the other 2. The train moved out 3 minutes after they got on. Never again! We'll stick on it all day rather than have such a narrow shave. We are full of convalescents for Havre to go straight on to the boat. They are frightfully enthusiastic about the way the British Army is looked after in this war. There's not much they don't get for us, they said. There are crowds of primroses out on the banks. Our infant R.A.M.C. officer's mess cook, a boy of about 20, who looks 16 and cooks beautifully, has just jumped off the train while it was going, grabbed a handful of primroses, and leapt on to the train again some coaches back. He came back panting and rosy, and said, "I've got some for you, Sister." We happened not to be going fast, but there was no question of stopping. I got some Lent lilies in Rouen, and have some celandines growing in moss, so it looks like spring in my bunk. Thursday, March 11th. Yesterday we took a long time getting to the ship from Rouen, and unloaded at 10 P.M. Why we had no warning about the departure of the train, and so nearly got left behind, was because it was an emergency call suddenly to clear the hospitals at Rouen to make room for 600 more expected from the front. We are being rushed up again without being stopped at Rouen for the first time on record, so I suppose there is a good deal doing. There was at Neuve Chapelle. It is a comfort to remember that the men themselves don't grudge or question what happens to them, and the worse they're wounded the more they say, "I think I'm lucky. My mate next me got killed." The birds are singing like anything now, and the buds are coming out, and the banks and woods are a mass of primroses. Friday, March 12th. We came straight through Boulogne in the night, and have been stuck half way to the front all day. I don't know why. Saturday, March 13th. We woke at the railhead for Béthune this morning, and cleared there and at the next place. Mostly wounded and some Indians. It was frightfully interesting up there to day. We saw the famous German prisoners taken at Neuve Chapelle being entrained, and we could hear our great bombardment going on, the biggest ever known in any war. The feeling of advance is in the air already, and even the wounded are exulting in it. The Indians have bucked up like anything. We are on our way down now, and shall probably unload at Boulogne. No time for more now. 11 P.M. We unloaded at Boulogne by 10 P.M. and are now on our way up again, shortest time we've ever waited, 1 hour after the last patient is off. Ambulance trains have been tearing up empty and back full all day, and are all being unloaded at Boulogne, so that they can go quickly up again. Boulogne has been emptied before this began. They were an awfully brave lot of badly woundeds to day, but they always are. Just now they don't mind anything, even getting hit by our artillery by mistake. Some of them who were near enough to see the effect of our bombardment on the enemy's trenches say they saw men, legs, and arms shot into the air. And the noise! They gasp in telling you about it. You could never believe it, they say. An officer told me exactly how many guns from 9.2's downwards we used, all firing at once. And poor fat Germans and thin Germans and big Germans and little Germans at the other end of it. A man of mine with his head shattered and his hand shot through was trephined last night and his longitudinal sinus packed with gauze. He was on the train at 9 this morning and actually improved during the day. He came to in the afternoon enough to remark, as if he were doing a French exercise, "You are a good nurse." The next time he woke he said it again, and later on with great difficulty he gave me the address of his girl, to whom I am to write a postcard. I do hope they'll pull him through. Sunday, March 14th, 4 P.M. Just bringing down another load. I have 120 wounded alone. The train is packed. No time for more. The J.J.'s are swarming. We unloaded at Boulogne yesterday evening, and were off again within an hour or two. Monday, March 15th, 2:30 A.M. Woke up just as we arrived at Bailleul to hear most incessant cannonade going on I ever heard, even at Ypres. The sky is continually lit up with the flashes from the guns (it is a pitch dark night), and you can hear the roar of the howitzers above the thud thud of the others. I think we are too far north for there to be any French 75's in it. I had to wake Sister D. to see it, as she had never seen anything like it before. We are only a few miles away from it. Must try and sleep now, as we shall have a heavy day to day, but it is no lullaby. 4:30 P.M. Just time for a scrawl. The train is packed with wounded, most of whom, including the poor sitting-ups, are now dead asleep from exhaustion. The British Army is fighting and marching all night now. The clearing hospitals get 800 in at a time, many with no dressings on. We have 27 officers on this train alone. I have a boy of 22 with both legs off. He is dazed and white, and wants shifting very often. Each time you fix him up he says, "That's champion." 40 of them were shelled in their billets. The Germans are said to be, some of them, fighting in civilian clothes till they get their uniforms. The men say there are hundreds of young boys and old men among them. They are making a desperate effort, and bringing everything they've got into it now. Later. We also have mumps, measles, scarlet fever, and diphtheria in the infectious coach. A baby lieutenant with measles showed me some marvellous sketch maps of German trenches and positions he'd made from observations through a periscope. He also had the very latest thing in sectional war maps, numbered in squares, showing every tree, farm, and puddle and trench. A place with 4 crossroads was called Confusion Corner, leading to a farm called Rest and Be Thankful. 10 P.M. Just got them all off after a strenuous day, and we are to go up again at 11 P.M. The 2 German divisions that reinforced are giving us a tremendous lot to do. It is just as well that this department was prepared for this, as it all goes like clockwork, and an enormous amount of suffering is saved by their preparedness. The amount that cannot be saved is grim enough. Must go to bed. Tuesday, March 16th. We loaded up very early this morning with 316 Indians and are just getting into Boulogne. I expect we shall be sent up again this evening. One of the Sikhs wailed before, during, and after his hand was dressed. A big Mussulman stuffed his hanky between his teeth and bit on it, and never uttered, and it was a much worse one. What was he to do with crying, he said. It was right for it to be done. May God bring blessings on my head, whereas it was full of pain, lo, now it was Atcha. Wednesday, March 17th. I didn't tell you that yesterday a kind IMS colonel at the place where we took the Indians on showed us a huge pile of used shell cases near the station, and we all had some. I've got a 12-pounder and a 16-pounder, like my pom-poms, only huge. Next time he's going to get us some Gurkha's kukris. On the way down a little Gurkha happened to get off the train for a minute, and when he looked round the train had gone past him. He ran after it and perched on one of the buffers till the next stop, when he reappeared, trembling with fright, but greeted with roars of amusement by the other Gurkhas. We had some more to day, including 12 with mumps, and one who insisted on coming with his mumpy friend, though quite well himself. We woke this morning at Merville, one of the railheads for Neuve Chapelle, and loaded up very early, guns going as hard as ever. Mine were a very bad lot, British except the 12 native mumpers, including some brave Canadians. They kept me very busy till the moment of unloading, which is a difficult and painful business with these bad ones, but the orderlies are getting very gentle and clever with them. I had among them 8 Germans, several mere boys. One insisted on kissing my hand, much to the orderlies' amusement. A truck full of pigs outside is making the most appalling noise. 11 P.M. I am writing in bed. We generally move up about 11:30 P.M. Every journey we hear thrilling accounts, rumours, and forecasts, most of which turn out to be true. We have had a lot of the St Eloi people. There were several versions of a story of some women being found in a captured German trench. One version said they were French captives, another that they were German wives. In one compartment were 5 Tommies being awfully kind to one German, and yet if he had a rifle and they had theirs, he'd be a dead man. The hospitals at Boulogne are so busy that no one goes off duty, and they are operating all night. We had time for a blow across the bridge after unloading, and I happened to meet my friend S., who was at Havre. She is on night duty, and they are grappling with these awful cases all night as hard as they can go. 4 were taken out of the motor ambulances dead this week. The jolting is the last straw for the worst ones, It can't possibly be helped, but it seems a pity. In all this rush we happen to have had nights in bed, which makes all the difference. The pigs still squeal, but I must try and go to sleep. Thursday, March 18th. We have had an off day to day at the place of woods and commons, which I hope and trust means that things are slackening off. It doesn't do to look ahead at what must be coming, now the ground is drying up before the job is finished, but we can be thankful for the spells of rest that come for the poor Army. We had a heavenly ramble this morning, and found blue periwinkles and anemones in the woods, but no primroses. Lots of palm and gorse. Robins, willow wrens, and yellowhammers were singing, the darlings, much prettier music than guns, and it is good to get away from the sound of motors and trains and whistles. We also had home-made bread and butter to day out of the village, which caused more excitement than the Russian successes. We are having much nicer food since the French chef left, and it costs us exactly half as much. Friday, March 19th. On the way down. Woke up at Bailleul and loaded early, wounded and sick. Not such severe cases among the wounded, but several pneumonias, enterics, etc., besides measles, diphtheria, and scarlet. Very cold, windy day, with snow on the ground and showers of snow at intervals. Some of mine are from the St Eloi fighting last Sunday and Monday. Some of N.'s regiment were badly caught between two ruined houses, each containing Maxims and machine guns. They had just been reinforced by some young recruits of Kitchener's Army, who detrained that night to go straight into the charge. "They come on well, them youngsters," said an old soldier, "but they got terrible mowed down. We lost 9 officers in a quarter of an hour." It has been a very costly splash altogether. One officer on the train has 14 wounds. Saturday, March 20th, Boulogne. The hospitals here have been pretty well emptied home now, and are ready for the next lot. Here we have been standing by all day while a big committee at Abbeville is settling whether our beloved and beautiful No. ambulance train is to be handed back to the French railway, and if so, whether it will be replaced by inferior French carriages, or whether one of the 4 new British trains that are coming will be handed over to us, or whether all the personnel will be disbanded and dispersed. I have a feeling that its day is over, but perhaps things will turn out better than that. I have been for 5 walks to day, including a bask in the sun on the sands, and a bath at the club, and a visit to the nice old R.C. church and the flower market. Tuesday, March 23rd, 9 P.M. Waiting all day at G.H.Q. Things are unusually quiet. One train has been through with only 90, and another with 100. We went for a walk along the canal this morning with the wee puppy, and this afternoon saw over the famous jute factory convalescent home, where they have 1,000 beds under one roof. It is like a town divided into long wards, dining rooms, recreation rooms, dressing station, chiropodist, tailor shop, etc., by shoulder-high canvas or sailcloth screens. They have outside a kitchen, a boiler, a disinfector for clothes, and any amount of baths. They have a concert every Saturday night. The men look so absolutely happy and contented with cooked instead of trench food, and baths and games and piano, and books and writing, etc. They stay usually 10 days, and are by the 10th day supposed to be fit enough for the trenches again. It often saves them a permanent breakdown from general causes, and is a more economical way of treating small disablements than sending them to the base hospitals. Last week they had 500 wounded to treat, and 2 of the M.O.'s had to take a supply train of 700 slightly wounded down to Rouen with only 2 orderlies. They had a bad journey. I had a French class after tea. We are now expecting to day's London papers, which are due here about 9 P.M. Have got some Hindustani to learn for my next lesson from Sister B., so will stop this. Wednesday, March 24th. Moved on at 11 P.M. and woke up at Chocques. A few smallish guns going. Loaded up there very early and at 2 other places, and are now nearly back to Boulogne, mostly wounded and a few Indians. Some of them are badly damaged by bombs. The men in the Neuve Chapelle touch were awfully disappointed that they weren't allowed to push on to Lille. The older men say wonderful things of Kitchener's boys. The only fault we 'ave to find wi' 'em is that they expose theirselves too much. Keep your 'eads down, we 'ave to say all the time. All they wants is to charge. According to the men, we shall be busy again at the end of this week. Midnight. On way to coast near Havre, where No. General Hospital is. Put all worst cases off at Boulogne, the rest mostly sleeping peacefully. Passed a place on coast not far south of Boulogne, where 600 British workmen are working from 7 A.M. to 10 P.M. building hospital huts for 12,000 beds, a huge encampment, ready for future business. Have seen cowslips and violets on wayside. Lovely moonlight night. Train running very smoothly. Thursday, March 25th. There is a great deal of very neat and elaborate glass market gardening going on round Rouen. It looks from the train an unbroken success. Thousands of fat little plants with their glass hats off, and thousands more with them on, and very little labour that can be seen. But the vegetables we buy for our mess are not particularly cheap. 9 P.M. Rouen. There are 3 trains waiting here, or rather at Sotteville, which means a blessed lull for the people in the firing line. There was a day or two after Neuve Chapelle when the number of wounded overflowed the possibilities of collection. The stretcher bearers were all hit and the stretchers were all used, and there were not enough medical officers to cope with the numbers. Extra ones were hurried up from the base hospitals very quickly. And if you wanted to live you had to walk or crawl or stay behind and die. We had a Canadian on who told me last night that he should never forget the stream of wounded dragging themselves along that road from Neuve Chapelle to Esters, who couldn't be found room for in the motor ambulances. 2 trains picked them up there, and there were many deaths on the trains and in the motor ambulances. The evacuation was very thorough and rapid to the bases and to the ships, but in any great battle involving enormous casualties on both sides there must be some gaps you can't provide for. Friday, March 26th. At Sotteville all day. Saturday, March 27th. Ditto. Piercing cold winds and no heating for a month past. Sunday, March 28th. Ditto. Monday, March 29th. Ditto. Tuesday, March 30th. Ditto. This cold wind has dried up the mud everywhere, and until to day there's been a bright sun with it. The men clean the train and play football, and the M.O.'s take the puppy out, and everybody swears a great deal at a fate which no one can alter, and we are all craving for our week old mails. Wednesday, March 31st. We actually acquired an engine and got a move on at 4 o'clock this morning, and are now well away north. Just got out where we stopped by a fascinating winding river and got some brave marsh marigolds. 5 P.M. Just getting into Boulogne. End of Chapter 8.